Hi all and welcome back to Amelia Finance. Today we're going to go over the 12 Agile Principles. I love Agile. I'm a Big Four consultant. I find that Agile has really helped me in my work as I consult for Fortune 100, Fortune 10 companies, specifically in the software industry. But I don't think Agile is limited to just software or technology. I think there's a lot of applications. So we'll go through the 12 and we will just flush them out from there. First one is customer satisfaction through continuous delivery of the product. And there's around 5 different things that we'll touch on that make up that number one. So you have number one is a backlog. You should have a well-defined backlog that is enough activities for you to be able to scope for the next sprint and upcoming sprints. You should have your customer or your product owner have a very clear vision, and you should be actively listening, trying to engage and flesh out what exactly they're looking for when they say customer, when they want satisfaction, and making sure that you're delivering the right things at the right time. You should make sure that you're actively listening to them. Once again, like having that back and forth, so maintaining a positive relationship, maybe take them out to coffee when you introduce yourself for the first time, or just setting up time for you to sync and just hear their thoughts. Maybe they have concerns or issues that you don't know about, that there isn't time to talk about, but finding ways to build those communication patterns, especially with your product owner, so that way you can deliver the right things at the right time to them in that continuous delivery method. And then the team. So in most agile examples, and not all, but does the team know, it's a developer team, does the team know how to build? Is the team comfortable? Do they have the right skill set? So asking those questions, that way you're not losing your customer along the journey. And then demos, setting up regular meetings, possibly after a sprint cycle, so every 2 weeks or so, being able to show the customer, hey, this is what we did, this is what we're excited about, can you verify this, can you make sure that this is what you're looking for? So that way you find that you get in this really good pattern and habit of showing them, so you can make adjustments as needed, so that way by the time the product is delivered at 6 months, a year's time, you're actually delivering what they want, even when requirements change, colors on the UI or user experience change, the intent, the purpose, but you pivoted during that whole time. So that way you can say at the end of the day, oh look, we have this wonderful product that you're actually 100% satisfied with. Number 2 of the Agile Principles. Divide large chunks of work into smaller and achievable tasks for quicker completion and easier integration of change. So there's 2 key ways to break this up. Number 1 is Fibonacci Numbers, or the golden ratio. This is the number sequence of 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. And it might be good for you to go do a search on your own to really understand it, but this is the 2 preceding numbers add up to become the next number. So 1 plus 1 equals 2. 1 plus 2 equals 3. 2 plus 3 equals 5, and so on and so forth. And so you'll see the little shell, the nautilus shell, and how it spins out and gets bigger each time. That's also the Fibonacci, or the golden ratio. And this is really nice to use it for planning poker, for adding LOE, level of effort estimates, because people are comfortable with 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and 13, they start getting uncomfortable. So that means that work is usually a little bit too large or too complex. And so that's for you as the PM to be able to say, you're doing some sort of, you have these large tasks, you added some scope around them, and now you're saying, okay team, these are large numbers. How do we roll this back and make this a little bit more manageable so that you can go and achieve it? Do we need to break it down into 2 tasks? Is it actually a 4-task item? Or is it a really complex task that we actually need to ask the product owner to go back and clarify it more? So that's really fun about the Fibonacci Numbers golden ratio. And then small actions actually help people to go do their work better, because they understand what they're trying to do. It's clear, it's task oriented, and they can be done in a short amount of time. Because most tasks should really, for work at least, should take around an hour and a half. If they're more than that, people get challenged, it becomes too much, they sort of lock down and close out, and they have to go and do the hard work themselves of breaking down that large task into smaller tasks. So if you can use all your collective brain power and already break down those tasks, it actually helps your team in the long run. And then usually things move faster, right? Because if someone is sitting, and it's not a core tenet of Agile, but if someone is sitting for too long on a task that they're not able to complete, that actually impacts the whole team. And that person should go and communicate with their team and say, hey, I'm challenged with this task. That should be brought up in the daily stand-up. But sometimes people don't do that. So you want to just try and break down those barriers to completion as easily as possible. A challenge for you, and these are the fun ones, what action on your to-do list is sitting there, but it's too big for you to break down? Do you need to clean out the hall closet, for example? Do you need to paint a room, right? What tasks do you need to do that action? If you need to paint a room, do you need to go purchase supplies, find the paint color, find the type of paint you want? So breaking it down into smaller actions that you're like, okay, like I don't have to go and paint the room in one weekend. I could do all these activities over the course of 4 weeks and then still have the end result. And so that's another way for applying Agile principles in your daily life. Number 3 of the Agile principles, adhere to the decided time frame for the delivery of a working product. So two key ways to make sure that that's captured accurately. Sprints and demos. Most teams set up sprints as in 2-week cycles. So you start on Monday or Tuesday, you work the whole work week, you work the next whole work week, and it ends the following Monday or Tuesday. That's how many teams do it. But sometimes you'll bundle sprints into themes or cycles depending on the needs of your organization. But it's good to have a defined, this is a sprint, these are our working hours, this is what we're doing. Secondly, you want to do demos. So depending on the frequency of your sprint, depending on the frequency of your cycle or the themes that you're working through, you may have demos after every sprint or after every theme or cycle. But it's really important to make sure that your customers are able to see a working product early, frequently, and regularly. And I get it, frequently, regularly, same word, but you need to make sure that you have that regular cadence. That way your customers, your key stakeholders can say, I can see exactly what they're doing really quickly. And if they're not able to attend, send out the recording, capture highlights. If you have a demo environment, they can go in and play, let them have access to that. Because it's one of the core components of Agile is working software over documentation. So the more you can get things live and going, so that way your stakeholders, your customers, your team can be in it and do something with it, that will make you win with Agile processes every day of the week. Number 4 of the Agile process, all stakeholders must frequently collaborate to ensure that the project is going in the correct direction. So before we dive into this one, you can see a lot of these have lots of themes that are very similar. Collaboration, keeping people in sync, seeing working software, and they're just different lenses which are critical, but the core thing is like those core principles are there and they're just baked in, and these are very different ways to think about it, but are still really critical. So 5 are still different ways. Sprint planning. You need to make sure that you're doing your sprint planning regularly so that when you're prepared, you're ready to go when the sprint happens. Make sure your prioritization is there in place, that you have done your ranking, you've done your level estimate planning, you've played around with the Fibonacci numbers. You have your regular demo cycles, so this speaks to having a rhythm of business calendar, ROB, so that way your stakeholders can look at what you're providing and very easily say, oh, this Tuesday we're having a retrospective, tomorrow we're having our daily stand-up, 3 weeks from now I'll see a demo, because you need to give them the visibility to be able to see what you're doing, because you might be accountable, but they're responsible. So that's RACI. So we'll touch on to that in a little bit. You also, jumping into RACI, stakeholder categories. How do you communicate with your stakeholders? What is their communication preference? What's the frequency? So RACI stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. And it's best to categorize people based on their role as opposed to their name. So you have Jamie, who's the director, you have Joe, who's the general manager. So don't use their names necessarily, but use the role that they sit in when you put them into the categories. And a good rule of thumb is to not necessarily show what your ratee is, where you've categorized them, because they might see themselves as in a different category themselves. So it's good for you to just make the decision, like, I'll put you in this category, and that's how we'll adjust how to communicate to you then. Talking about communication methods. How do you like to be communicated? Is it email? Is it instant message? Is it a neighbor next door that needs an actual letter or just a conversation? Do you need Zoom calls? Do you need to create an announcement on the radio? What type of method? Why? So those are also key things there. And then conflict management. We'll touch on this in the future, but how do you mitigate conflict? How do you manage conflict? How do you deal with it? How do you resolve it? Because you have all these stakeholders which have good, relevant reasons, right? They're passionate about why they want something done this way, and it's a real reason. So you have to think about there will be conflict, and how do you manage that in an appropriate way? Number 5 of the Agile Principles. Create a supportive environment to motivate team members and encourage them to get their job done. So once again, you're the PM, you're studying for the PMP, or you've passed it, right? And you're just wanting to refresh your Agile core principles. So it is for you to make sure that you're building an environment that the team enjoys coming to work. They feel trusted, they have autonomy on their life and their work life. And a lot of that, much of that goes to the project manager that's managing the entire team. So around 5 different areas to focus on: trust, learning and development, active listening, have fun, building working norms, and motivation. Trust and active listening actually blend a little bit together, because it's important that you're actively listening to the concerns that are being raised by your team. Perhaps there's harassment or bullying, or there's unkind sentiment floating around. So when you hear that, perhaps you're oblivious and you don't recognize it. But if you hear it from your team member, it's really important that you address that quickly, you address it thoughtfully and intentionally, because people will leave quickly if that is an environment there. And that is not you as a PM. You want to uphold ethics and values. You want to make sure everyone's respected, no matter what, and what can be anything. So it's really important that you're there and making sure that that environment and that place of work is a safe zone, that people are comfortable and they can do their best work. And that builds trust. And that's actually a core component of several questions on the PMP test will be on trust. So how do you develop it? How do you engage with it? How do you strengthen it? So critical, active listening, especially when when the workplace is negative. Having fun. Some teams enjoy having lunch together, some teams don't. Some teams want to go meet on the weekend, some teams don't. So finding the working norms that make sense for your team. Some teams love trivia, some teams want to go on walks to the coffee shop. So really just finding what makes sense for your team so that you can build that little bit of community. And not that you're best friends, but you want it to be a comfortable place, going back to trust, that people can be heard, they can develop professionally and personally, and it's a great place to be. And then build working norms. To build trust, ask your team what they want to do. Do they want to come in? Do they want to make sure that everyone's here at 10 a.m. to have a stand-up meeting? Is that a good time for them? You don't make the assumptions. Let them decide and share what they want. So that way they have, once again, the autonomy in their life, which builds trust and makes them know that they're being actively listened to. And then motivation. Sometimes you have budget, sometimes you don't. So finding, not everything has to be costly. So if your team wants to do lunch, say, hey, everyone bring lunch on Tuesday and we will go and we'll block off the calendar 10 to 1 and we'll just chill. Or walking to the coffee shop, right? Like it's down the road, it's a 10-minute walk, 10-minute back. Maybe you have budget, you yourself have budget to pay for it, maybe you don't. But just having fun, enjoying things, building motivation, and just like having a good time with your team. That's a fun one there. Number 6 of the Agile Principles. So we're halfway done, 6 out of 12. So prefer face-to-face communication over other methods. Face-to-face. So this is a little bit challenging because oftentimes are virtual, and we've had the work from home, pandemic, COVID-19, all of that. So this one it's really best practices. So this is where you have to take Agile best practices and flex it for what you need at your particular time. So the closest you can do to face-to-face meetings is virtual, and making sure, just asking everyone to turn on their cameras as much as possible, perhaps asking if they would be willing for one day a week to be a particular video call day where everyone turns it on so that way everyone can be prepared and ready, and just flexing with it. It sounds like many people will go back to the office in the future, but as you have virtual teams, right, like it is difficult. Face-to-face is best practice. It's wonderful when you can do it. You can read the body language, you can get to know the person on a little bit deeper level, but sometimes it's just not feasible. So it's fun to think about alternative methods of communication. There's video call, there's you have the metaverse, right? How do you create an avatar that fits you and your lifestyle, or fits who you want to be in the future or who you interpret yourself as? So that's also a fun way to go and be playful about that. And then thinking about global time zones. This is, you have a team in India, you have a team in Europe, you have a team in Australia, North America. What time zone fits for best for all of them? Not all of it does. So finding a flex, maybe one week it's best for India, another week is best for Europe. So just finding and flexing and clearly communicating to your team why you're doing this. Last week was this, now it's that. This is a holiday coming up, so no one's going to attend, so we can do it at an easier time for you. So just finding the norms that work best for everyone. Number 7, this is core to Agile. Working software is the primary measure of progress. So this goes back to a lot of what we've spoken about earlier. Having good sprint planning, having a strong backlog, having regular demos. So that way you can make sure that you know you're delivering things at regular intervals. If a customer or like one of your someone that's critical to the project can't attend some of those meetings, the demos, sometimes it makes sense to have a one-on-one with them and just go over at a high level what's happened just to keep them up to speed. But use good judgment, right? Like you don't want to be making one-off special things for different people that doesn't add value to the team, because you do have your own work responsibilities which take a lot of time. You're the project manager. You have lots of things that you're responsible for. Additionally, in this one, it says working software is the primary measure of progress. What is working? What is working defined as? Example, you have your favorite application that you use on a daily basis, and you got hired by this company and you're part of the team. But that application may be old. It may be 5 years old, 10 years old even, like Gmail. And so you're adding additional components or functionality to that. How do you define working then if something is already working? So that's for you to circle back with your primary stakeholder, who's creating the product owner, and just talking with them. Define working. Does it mean we fixed the bug? Does it mean we added new functionality? Does it mean that the product continues to work 24/7, 365 days of the year without error? So especially as a product becomes older or is a more mature product, defining what working is, that's another critical part of the puzzle there. And then your timeline. So how often do you do demos? How often do you review it? What's the frequency? So what upcoming things are you expecting to launch? So that's for you, once again, as a project manager, because you're projecting all that, to know what your timeline is and when things will be delivered at what schedule. Number 8 of the Agile Principles, try to maintain a constant pace of development. 4 key themes here. Balance. As you start getting more comfortable with your team becomes fairly stable, you understand what their strengths and weaknesses are, you're able to find a constant pace of development, which is called velocity. And what you have to do is as you plan your upcoming sprints, you can say, okay, we take 10 number of velocity points, but we know so-and-so is going on vacation, so we might drop it. We know there's a holiday that might be impactful. And so what you're doing is you're trying to plan out, well, what things do we want to launch when? And so that way you have this regular cadence, because you don't want to do every sprint is a race where everyone's like exhausted at the end of it and they can't actually do more work, because that's not the point of sprint. The point of a sprint is you're able to regularly build out how much is going to be accomplished and when it will be accomplished. So as you build out and as you get more comfortable with your team, you will see you'll see your velocity increase over time. Not necessarily always, but you want to be making your customers happy and satisfied. So you don't want to over deliver at one sprint and then under deliver the next sprint. So finding that balance between what you're delivering is the best way to go about it. And then projecting the future. You don't have a magic ball, but you can project holidays, vacations, medical leaves, leaves of absence, and just highlight to your team, hey, we know so-and-so is taking a month trip to France in August. Can I get anyone spun up so that way by the time August happens, it won't even impact, so that way we are able to maintain that constant pace of velocity. Agile principle number 9. Maintain the quality of the product by paying attention to technical details. So if you know that you need to build this infrastructure base that will take 2 sprints but has really no demo value to the customer, sometimes you need to call that out, right? Like, this is a big lift, this will save us additional time and resource, and surface that to your product owners so that way they're aware of what technical details that you're thinking of, so that way they can make those decisions. Maybe they say, we don't know, we might change the platform we're sitting on in the future, but it's for you as the project manager to make sure that you're raising those things so that way they know what's happening. Additionally, what I've seen, technical debt sprints, those are helpful. What I've seen is normally those happen at the end of June. Many software companies, their fiscal year starts July 1, so the last 2 weeks of June will often be a technical debt sprint. Additionally, the last 2 weeks of December will also be technical debt sprints. And those are just nice because maybe there's small tasks that they haven't had a chance to finish up. Maybe you need a particular person that only came available at this time. It just helps you level up what you're working on and fix little things that you've seen on the page. Maybe something doesn't scale properly. So it's nice to have technical debt sprints built into the project plan. And especially in times when people really potentially aren't going to be joining those demos as often. And then also balance. So balance between product and delivery, right? Like finding what makes sense for your team, going back to velocity, building that out, and just making sure that you're delivering something that whatever you're delivering today will be able to be supported throughout the course of the project or the product lifecycle. Number 10, this is one of my favorite of the Agile principles, maintain simplicity. So goes back, what is the MVP? What is the minimal viable product that we can deliver that will check all the check boxes and make this actually be a living, breathing product that satisfies the customer's requirements and it makes them happy? So simplicity, right? Like streamlining something. What is the least amount of work needed? What's the smallest team we could do to deliver this? What's the smallest budget? So really being cost effective, being thrifty, being thoughtful about your resources, and still delivering something that the customer says, oh my goodness, this is so wonderful. It helps me every day of the week. I save so much time. So simplicity, all the extra features and fluff, most of the time people don't care. They just want the basic product. Number 11 of the Agile principles, promote self-organization in the team. So 3 key principles within that. Sharing. What skills does each team member have today that perhaps you don't know about? Maybe someone's really good at a programming language that you're not using. Could they share with the team? Could they grow the skill sets the team has? What skill sets is the team interested in learning? Are they saying, we would really love to learn about Python, we would really like to learn about some other something, right? Like, you're not to make the assumption, they're supposed to tell you. Could someone on the team share that? Does someone have that knowledge? Maybe someone loves PowerPoint and they're like, and the team has recognized that they need to be stronger in PowerPoint skills. Ask them. If they want to have the learning, then set it up so that way they can go and they can continue to be self-develop themselves. And teach presenting skills. This is critical. I'm presenting right now. You likely are presenting frequently in your day-to-day operations. So think about, should you start a Toastmasters? Is there someone on the team that could share presenting skills? Is there someone in the broader company that wants to learn how to be a better presenter or teach skills, right? Like, think about how you can help the team improve, not just on your own project and helping that, but in the broader scale, so that way they have additional opportunities. And this goes back to building trust with your team. They want to do cool things. They're excited to come to work with you, but that's because you're giving to them what they are wanting and asking for. And then additionally, you as the PM, personal development. So if you haven't taken your PMP, go take it. If you have taken your PMP, there's the personal, there's additional skill sets, and like you have to maintain a certain number of units every year, every 5 years or so. Think about what you can learn that you also can share with the team. And just by setting that example that, hey, on Saturday you went and took this coursework, it was great, and it would be valuable for you, sharing with your teams, that way it's not just you telling them go learn more, it's also you taking what you're telling them to do and applying it on yourself. And 12th and finally, probably my most favorite, regularly reflect on your performance for continuous improvement. 5 or so different callouts, retrospectives. And we haven't really dove into these, but what are the things that you did really well with? What are the things that weren't so great? What are the things that you can leave behind for the next sprint cycle? One of them I've heard is gems, rocks, and anchors. And what's nice is you let the team tell you. Sometimes you'll have a whiteboard session, maybe a mural or some sort of sharing application, and the team will highlight lots of different things that you may or may not have recognized. And each sprint should actually improve, and hence your velocity improves, and building the trust because the team has shared what they did well, what they're excited about, because those things could be very different than what you're excited about. And then they can talk about, oh, this was really challenging, but we overcame it. And so having that bit of celebration at the end of every sprint cycle, really, really exciting. Like I love the retrospective. Those are really one of my favorites. Another really cool thing is kudos culture. Sometimes this will be anonymous, sometimes it won't, but calling out who's had a really hard week but still performed and had a positive attitude and really tried their best. Who has just been challenged after challenge after challenge, but they're still showing up. And the list goes on, right? So just like maybe someone spent the time and trained someone on something new or shared a different angle and that really leveled up someone's work. So just making it the environment trusting and happy and compassionate. And then once again, asking the team, that's the beauty of the retrospective and the kudos culture, is you're asking the team what they've done well, areas for improvement, and you're actively listening. So all these principles all are interwoven together. That's what's so neat. And then celebrating, this is my favorite. How can you make the team know that they're appreciated? You may or may not have budget, as I've said earlier. So think about what are things that just would blow the team away, right? Like you give them the day off for their favorite holiday if it's not part of the calendar. And you say, hey, can we all work an extra day for the next 5 days or so, or an extra hour for the next 5 days or so to make up for that? By giving the team and having empathy, letting them celebrate, maybe it's as simple as just bringing over the foosball table and just like having an hour or so just doing something fun, because we're all people at the end of the day. So we just want to enjoy life and make things fun. So with that, thanks for watching Amelia Finance. This was the 12 Agile Principles. Ask questions. Let me know what you're thinking about. Let me know what there's still gaps. I'm going to do one on how to do the PMP application shortly, so that should be out soon. But with that, thanks for watching Amelia Finance. Like, follow, ask questions. Thanks all.